installing, configuring, and troubleshooting storage devices. So this one's going to be about installing system memory, configuring system, can install and configure mass storage devices, install and configure removable storage, configure RAID, and troubleshoot storage devices. So system memory, the main storage area for programs, RAM, random access memory. Now we're going to go over volatile, a type of memory where data cannot be stored without power being supplied. So
is that supply? Does that power has to be consistent?
Yes. What volatile memory did we discuss last week?
Was it EMV?
Say that again.
It's the memory that's it's more efficient than it's the new memory that's coming out that's more efficient than the same
The BIOS.
BIOS.
Oh, BIOS.
NVRAM.
NVRAM. That's what I was trying.
So the BIOS can needs that CMOS battery and the CMOS chip. So the CMOS chip is where all the memory is stored for the BIOS. So you're going to look at that, and then it needs that CMOS battery in order to keep that memory. You understand?
Take the CMOS out and you clear all the memory.
Yep. Same thing with random access memory, or just regular RAM that you put in the computer. When you turn the computer off, the RAM is cleared. When you put the computer to sleep, things still stay in the RAM because there is still power being supplied to that RAM.
Gotcha.
Is that an example of volatile?
Yes. Remember, NVRAM or non-volatile RAM, it stays no matter what. So that's the BIOS chip, where the rest of that stays no matter what. So that's the initial configuration of the actual computer. And we'll go over what posting is and things like that. Can anybody tell me what BIOS stands for?
Basic input output system.
Yep, there we go. Y'all already know this stuff. Virtual memory, an area on the hard disk allocated to contain pages of memory. So let's go over and see what that looks like. So the most volatile is the fastest RAM. Least volatile is the slowest RAM. So you got cache on the CPU. Then you have your RAM, your mass storage, and then your removable storage. So the cache moves faster than the regular RAM that's in your computer, and it moves way faster than your mass storage or your removable storage. That's not always the case today. Because why has mass storage, if anybody knows, why has mass storage caught up with regular RAM?
The clouds.
Solid
No.
state drives.
That's it. Solid state drives are now made out of the same thing that they were making RAM out of. So it used to be these were movable, meaning that the hard drive was a disk that spun in the inside, and it was only as fast as this could read it. Now it's static, like this. So there are no moving parts. It moves way faster.
So that it's digital instead of mechanical.
Yes. So DRAM or dynamic RAM, a type of volatile memory that stores each bit of data as a charge within a single transistor. SDRAM, a variant of DRAM chip designed to run at the speed of the system clock, thus accelerating the periodic refresh cycle times. So SDRAM is older technology and is synchronized to the system clock. They don't use that anymore. So everything is DRAM. Stores each data bit as an electrical charge within a single bit cell. The bit cell composed of a capacitor and a transistor. The charge dissipates, causing the memory to lose information. So remember, if the charge is not there, it loses the information. Volatile memory. Dynamic memory has to be refreshed in order for it to keep its information. DDR SDRAM, the standard for SDRAM where data is transferred twice per clock cycle. And what's a clock cycle again?
One, one complete cycle.
The time it takes for it to charge. So it's transferring data twice per clock cycle. So you have DDR 200 or PC 1600. The memory clock is 100 megahertz. The bus clock is 100 megahertz. And the data rate transfer, because it's doing it 2 times per clock cycle, 200. So the transfer rate is 1.6 gigabits per second. Then you have DDR26 or PC 2100. It moves at 133. Memory clock, bus speed 133, data rate 266, moves at 2.1 gigabits per second. PC 2700, 333, 2.7 gigabits per second. DDR 400 moves at 3.2 gigabits per second. The data transfer rate is 400 times per clock cycle.
Why does it seem like the rounder's off?
Say that again.
What is the correlation between the data rate and the transfer rate?
So you're talking about
Like based on that 200 is somehow being converted to 1.6, and the 400 is being converted to 3.2. So there must be some kind of correlation between those two, right? Or calculation. But I don't get it. Because 333 is 2.7, but 400 is 3.2. I don't get it.
yeah, we'll have to break the math down.
Okay.
Just know that, and we can break that math down a little bit later
Yeah.
because it's
I just didn't know if it was important for us to understand that or not.
no, not the correlation.
Okay.
Because the difference is that you would only go out and buy this.
Mhm.
You're not getting you won't go out and get, oh, let me get two DDR 400s and a DDR 333.
Gotcha.
Or you would need to go get, because you can't, these don't intersect with each other.
Understood.
Like neither do these. So DDR2, the memory clock can move at 100 to 266. It's going to transfer from 3.2 to 8.5 gigabits per second. DDR3 can do that again, except it moves at a faster rate. So every time they change these, they improve the efficiency of how the RAM worked. So it's running faster clock cycles. So therefore, the transfer rate gets faster and it can transfer faster gigs per second. So remember we were talking about the DDR3 RAM that you needed for your computer. This is why.
Got you.
So that's why I said they do have 1600, but your computer will slow it down to 1066.
Got
Then
you.
you have DDR4, which is moving at 12.8 to 25.6 gigabits per second. So DDR2 1066, memory works at 266 megahertz. The bus speed works at 533. Double data rate gives it 1066 MTs. Normal transfer rate of 8.533 gigabits per second. And remember, we talked about the DDR3 1600. Memory works at 200 megahertz. Bus works at 800 megahertz, giving it double data rate of 1600. Normal transfer rate is 12.8 gigabits per second. So DDR3, 12.8 gigabits per second, but DDR4 1600, it has a lower voltage than DDR3. So it's lower power consumption. And then the DDR4 2400 moves at 19.2 gigabits per second, and it's faster than any DDR3 RAM. So memory module, a printed circuit board that holds a group of memory chips that acts as a single unit. And DIMM, dual inline memory module, standard packaging for system memory. There are different configurations for different RAM types. Located in the slots on the motherboard, they're removable and replaceable, defined by their design and by the number and type of chips that they are contained. So the little tips are the pins. So regular DDR RAM had 184 pins, and it had 2.5 to 2.6 voltage, meaning that you needed more power to power that chip. So your power consumption was high. DDR2, 240 pins, it ran at a lower voltage rate. DDR3 ran at a lower voltage rate than DDR2. So every time they advanced DDR RAM, it just got more efficient and got a little bit better. They were able to add more pins, and move at a lower voltage rate. SODIMMs, that's what's used in laptops. So this memory is half the size of DIMMs. They're available in 32-bit or 64-bit data paths and commonly found in laptops and iMac systems. Most Macs only use SODIMM. So DDR and DDR2 have the same number of pins, but the key position is different. Typically fits in the slots that pop up at a 45-degree angle. Remember, the pins that you were looking at were DDR3 204 packages. The newer Macs running a DDR4 are 260 pin packages. Single channel memory is with one memory with one 64-bit bus between the CPU and the RAM. The dual channel memory has two pathways to the CPU, enabling 120 bits of data transfer per second per transaction. Effective in two pathways. Installed memory modules should be identical in terms of speed, capacity, chip number, density, and location. So let's look. So DIMM channel A, 1 and 3, DIMM channel DIMM channel B is 2 and 4, meaning that you have to put the same type of RAM in both of those slots, or else that RAM won't work or won't read correctly. Understood?
Yep.
Does it mean all four? Does it mean like 2 and 4 and 1 and 3 has to be identical?
2 and 4 and 1 and 3. That's why it's channel A and channel B.
It'll be-
Yeah, so that's why they're different colors as well, meaning that motherboard can use two different types of memory, of two different types of RAM, but in some of those slots, you're gonna have to put the same exact type of RAM. You can't mix it up.
And all slots need to be occupied, or can you?
No, not all slots need to be occupied, but if you're gonna occupy two slots, they need to be the same. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is it possible to have one slot in channel A and one slot in channel B?
Yeah.
So as long as you they don't have to be the same as well, do they?
No, they don't.
As long as they're different. Okay.
Yeah. A have to go with A and B has to go with B. Parity checking, an error checking method where each byte of data in the memory is accompanied by a ninth bit used to check it for corrupted data. Non-parity means that it does not perform any error checking. ECC memory is RAM with built-in correction security. Parity checking uses 8 bits of memory and 1 bit to check the parity. It is older technology and it's rarely ever used now. Most RAM is all ECC now. Most desktops now use non-parity memory. Systems that require a high level of reliability uses ECC memory. ECC has an extra chip and a 72-bit data bus. The motherboard must support the use of ECC memory and cannot mix ECC and non-ECC modules. If the motherboard supports an upgrade but the system is not configured to use it, enable a dual channel configuration. Increasing the speed, the bus speed requires purchasing a new motherboard and memory modules and possibly a new CPU, which goes without saying. So remember, when you're installing it, the DIMM must match the motherboard. Different capacity modules can be installed, meaning that if they're the same type of chip, so you can have two DDR4 1600s, but one has 8 gigs of RAM and the other one has 4, so that you have a total of 12 gigs of RAM. That's okay. But you can't mix a DDR3 1066 with a DDR3 1600. Capacity that they carry doesn't matter. For best performance and reliability, you want to configure multi-channel systems with identical memory modules for each channel. ECC memory cannot be mixed with non-parity memory, and it must be supported by the motherboard. Registered memory cannot be mixed with unbuffered modules and must be supported by the motherboard. We'll discuss that a little bit later. So, what are the principal characteristics of DRAM technology? Anybody answer that one? Anybody know what DRAM is?
Dynamic RAM.
It is high density and low cost. SDRAM or synchronous DRAM is so called. Why is it called synchronous DRAM? Because it works at the same
Because
speed as the motherboard. Is SDRAM still used?
no,
Nope.
Good answer. What is the clock speed of PC 2100 DDR SDRAM? (133 MHz). So remember when I said it doesn't matter what the correlation is, just matters that you kind of know the chart. Understood?
2.1 gigabytes.
Yeah. So you don't need to know why it adds up. You just need to know what it means. How many pins are there on a DIMM stick of DDR2 SDRAM? 240. How can you distinguish memory slots on a motherboard? Why do they look different? Like, what do they look like?
Uh, the connections, pin slots.
A little bit slipper, a little bit simpler than that.
The grouping of the pens.
They have plastic clips at both ends. So, what RAM is normally inside of laptops? Close.
Sodium. Sodium.
So dim. So dim did it. Yes. Okay, so you're configuring a system with dual channel memory. You have two modules and there are 4 slots. How would you determine which slots to use?
The types of modules, the two modules that are the same would go in one channel.
Close. You would check the system guide. Most Intel boards will require the use of 1 and 3 to use both channels, but it's best not to proceed without consulting the vendor's documentation. Meaning that, yeah, some vendors like Intel use 1 and 3, but I am blanking. Like Foxconn will use 1 and 3. There's different motherboards. Some of them use 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4, but most of the time it would be 1 and 3, and they're always colored. So you would use both the slots that are colored the same.
Okay.
Your PC system bus is 800 megahertz, and you have 1 GB stick of PC3 12800 already installed. You have 1 GB stick of PC3 8500 available. Should you add it to the system?
No.
You should realize that the whole memory bus will operate at the slower speed, but otherwise there is no definitive answer. It does depend on how the PC is used. The performance and benefits of more RAM probably outweigh the speed penalty in most circumstances, though. So remember, these are the same type of RAM, just one has a slower bus speed.
so it's kind of not an answer.
What do you mean it's kind of not an answer?
Well, it says should you add it to the system, and it says well, kind of maybe.
Yeah,
Would it?
meaning
It would.
that you can and you actually can add it to the system. Is really what it's going after.
Or would it be a benefit to put the other one in there since the
Yes, so
bus?
you have to answer that question. Not it's not a definitive yes or no. Meaning that all these answers are never yes or no sometimes. I said never yes or no sometimes.
That was on a test. How we is this a test question?
It most likely will be, and normally this will be
Check it out.
in A, B, or C. And if it is true or false, you would say true. You can add it to the system if you want to.
So does that mean you would have 2 gigs operating at the PC3 8500 speed as
Yes.
opposed to, okay. So is that faster than the 1 gig at PC3 12800?
Well, as I said, it's the performance benefits. Will it outweigh the speed? If you're getting more RAM, do you need more speed? So
Okay.
should RAM be
Um,
operating faster, or is it going to benefit you to have more of it?
okay.
So you would kind of weigh those issues. Whether whether I benefit from having more RAM or I benefit for having faster RAM.
Okay. Got it.
So additional memory was installed in the user system. Now it will not boot. What steps would you take to resolve this ticket?
Remove the added RAM, added memory.
You gotta
Yep. First, verify the correct
correct
memory
memory.
type was installed, the correct configuration, consider dual inline memory channel. If that was it, check the new memory module if it's seated properly. Remember, sometimes the computer will turn on, but you get no video. That's because the memory was not seated properly. So you always have to check that as well if you don't see it. Then try swapping the memory around in the memory slots. Basically, trial and error.
So in that example right there, how would you, would you actually take your physical computer and do all that, or is there any kind of way you can actually do it from the screen, find it out?
No, that would be the physical. Remember, it
Physical.
won't boot. So you're going to have to touch the actual computer.
Gotcha.
If the computer's not booting, you're going to have to go into the computer to do that.
Gotcha.
Mass storage devices, they are non-volatile storage devices that are able to hold data when the system is powered off. Remember, NVRAM or non-volatile storage. Can be internal or removable. The stored data is used in one of these methods: magnetic, optical, or solid state. HDD, hard disk drive, a device that provides persistent mass storage of a PC. Primary persistent mass storage um, on workstations typically stores the OS, the applications, drivers, and user data. On servers, it normally stores OS files, individual user files, and shared sources such as databases. Tracks on hard disk drives, data written as concentric rings on the disk drive. Cylinders, the aggregate of all tracks that reside on the same location of every disk surface. It can hold up to 8 terabytes, data stored on metal or glass platters coated with a magnetic substance. Each platter has a top and a bottom, read write heads. The heads float above the platters. The form factors are 3.5 inch or 2.5 inch. 2.5 inches goes in laptops or small form factors. The 3.5 inches are the bigger ones. The height varies, but most of the time your 2.5s are near the 5 millimeter. Any questions about those?
Nope.
Access time. Speed at which the memory or disk drive can be addressed and utilized. The internal transfer rate means how fast the read write operations are performed on the disk platters. The external transfer rate Measures how fast the data can be transferred on a CPU across the bus. Early life failure rate, a method of calculating how quickly the device will fall through accelerated testing. MBTF, mean time between failures, the rating on a device component that predicts the expected time between failures. Life expectancy, the length of time for which a device can be expected to remain reliable. And smart, technology designed to alert the user to possible hard disk failures before the disk drive becomes unstable. Um, a- Storage adapters and cables. Host bus adapter, a component that allows storage devices to exchange data on a computer system by using a particular interface. Drive controller is the circuitry in the disk. It's basically the connection point for the internal mass storage devices. So the old technology, which is PATA and SCSI, SCSI, and now everything uses SATA. So you have parallel ATA, that's what PATA stands for. And SATA stands for serial ATA. You won't see SCSI drives. I'll show you a picture of them a little bit later. So SATA, widely used hard disk drive. Hard disk interface using a 7-pin data connector and a 15-pin power connector. Transfer data in serial format. Cables can be up to 1 meter and are thin and flexible. Cables terminate with 7-pin connectors. Each host adapter supports a single device. The drives are hot swappable. What does that mean? Anybody knows what hot swappable means?
You don't
Like,
have to.
Turn your system off.
Correct.
That part.
All right. So the original SATA move 1.5 gigs. SATA 2 move 3 gigs per second. SATA 3 can move up to 6 now. Here's what SATA connectors look like. So this is the data cable, which is the shorter L, and then the power cable is the longer L. This is what they look like on the actual board. Now these over here, those are the legacy PATA or IDE ports. So remember when I told you about that, the PATA ports were like that, meaning that there was one drive had to be the slave and the other one had to be the master in order for you to use two. So remember when we were doing the jumpers to clear the CMOS, there were jumpers on side of the PATA drives where you had to put to be able to put the drive either into slave or master mode. Master meant that it booted first. Slave mode means that it was just a secondary drive. With the new SATA ports, it was different. Now each drive only uses one hard drive. So each port only uses one, and now you can put 6 hard drives inside of one computer. And the way that you would configure that, the one that would boot first, you would actually tell the BIOS to boot to that drive first. So it was just a little bit. It actually helped us be able to put more computers more hard drives inside the computer without long ribbon cables going everywhere. Any questions about that? Any questions so far before we move on to solid state hard drives? Sounds like a resounding no. All
I
right,
know.
solid state hard drives, a personal computer storage device that stores data in a non-volatile special memory instead of on disk or tape. There are no moving parts. It's quieter, less prone to failure due to shock. The seek time is way faster. File fragmentation is actually eliminated. Um, so when you had your hard drive moving slow or your computer started moving slow, it was due to fragmentation on the hard drive. Fragmentation on the hard drive. Does anybody know about fragmentation?
I remember we used to have to defrag back in the day. You had to send your computer through that slow process, but they don't do that anymore. They do it on their own, right?
No.
Unused spaces that g- creates a gap between the information that's stored on the drive. So when if you had, for example, a file stored on your drive, and then you stored another file that was stored next to each other, then when you delete one, there's a space there. So then when more data is stored, it has to jump over that space and defrag, and it brings it all together. So you can put all the parts together closer.
Yes. So the way that my professor explained it to us a long time ago was um, fragmentation was like you getting dressed in the morning. It would take you a whole lot longer to get dressed if your shoes were outside, your socks were in the closet, your shirt was inside a drawer, your pants were downstairs in the living room, and your underwear was somewhere in the garage. It takes you longer to do that because now you have to run around and collect those things. Now, if everything was all in one place inside the closet and you just had to open up the closet and pull it out, you would get dressed a lot faster. So that's what defragmentation was doing to your computer. It was putting all the files into one contiguous line instead of all over the place where it would have to, as he said, jump over other files to get there. They need the whiteboard to do that. So the disadvantage to SSDs is the high cost, but as of now, that's going down. When I first bought a 128 gigabyte hard drive, it cost me almost 150 bucks for 128 gigs. You can get one of those now for 30 bucks. And that happened actually almost recently, maybe within like the last 12 months. So the SSD interfaces and form factors. So you have advanced host controller interface, which is a logical interface used by SATA drives to communicate with the bus. Um, Non-volatile memory host controller interface is a logical interface used by PCIe-based SSD drives. So those SATA drives, where the ones for PCIe or PCIe Express, they're more rectangular. Okay.
Kind of.
Um, let's see if I can show you. Does it show a picture of them?
They look more like RAM, the express chips, like a RAM module.
Yeah, it almost looks like RAM.
Anyway, okay.
me do this for you. So this is what it would look like. So these are the PCIe on this side, and that's how it fits in.
What are you showing? I'm not.
Can you see it?
Can't
No,
see it.
it's not showing up.
Hold on.
Man, y'all won't even say nothing, man. Here we go.
So this is what the NVMe looks like for PCIe Express. That's the PCIe Express side, and that's where it will plug in at. And why would we use PCIe instead of SATA?
Speed.
Correct. PCIe moves faster than SATA. All right. They're often used for the OS and applications. So there is a such thing called a hybrid drive, which has SSD and um, the hard disk drive. So they call them Apple calls them fusion drives. Um, Everybody else calls them hybrid drives, but they're the same thing. They use the SSD for the OS and applications, and then all the files are stored on just a regular hard disk drive, but they're made together. Um, some SSDs are connected using a SATA interface, which moves at 6 gigs per second capacity, and it can bottleneck over AHCI logical interface. That's why they're using PCIe directly with the NVMe. PCIe based RAM can be implemented as regular PCI adapter card. Uses the M2 adapter interface. M2 adapters are not hot swappable or hot pluggable. So that you're going to have to really pay attention to. So you can't just not switch it out on the computer hot, or else it would actually destroy it. It's smaller than the PCIe adapter. Supply the power over the bus, and you can use up to 4 PCIe lanes. SSD usually outperforms hard drives, technically by almost 600 times. It's almost SSDs are really instant on. Like when they first came out, it would take maybe sometimes 10 to it would take maybe almost 30 seconds for your computer to actually boot up. If you had a really nice, good hard drive, 30 seconds was like the longest it would take. With an SSD, it boot up in like 5 or 6 seconds. It literally booted almost instantly. Um, you compare different types of data transfer. Its read performance was faster. Its write performance is faster. The sequential and random access is faster. It can transfer a lot of small files. Its throughput is better. Its latency is way better as well. Wear leveling routines by flash drives to prevent any single storage location from being overused and optimized over the life of the device. That's the only problem with SSDs is they can only be written and erased so many times. It is a lot of times, but it's still so many times. So flash chips are susceptible to degradation. The use of wear leveling prevents any single location from being overused. Wear leveling helps optimize the life of the drive, meaning that it's not just only going to use one space and then move on to the next. It's going to try to spread out everything all over the drive. So I just spoke about hybrid drives or fusion drives, as they would call them in Mac. The drive contains a SSD portion, which function as large cache containing frequently accessed data. Um, so as I said, it's really just uh, SSD paired with a hard disk drive. That's about it. That's all it is. And the user does not have direct control over which files are stored in the cache. The driver firmware uses AI to predict the files that you're actually going to use a lot, and it moves those files to the SSD and leaves the other files on the hard disk drive. But because SSDs are becoming just as cheap now, that's getting used less and less. Dual drive configurations install separate SSDs and HHD and hard disk drive devices. System chipset and storage drivers make caching decisions. Um, User does not have control over the use of the SSD cache. So we talked about PATA, which is older drive technology. It stands for parallel ATA drive. Remember, I talked about the master and the slave, and also referred to as IDE or EIDE. Paths between PATA drives and motherboards called IDE1 and IDE2 are primary IDE and secondary IDE. Uses parallel data transfers with 6-bit transfer per tick clock. Each PATA channel supports two devices, 0, 1, and 1, or master and slave. So most cables are cable select. PATA cables can be up to 18 inches long and have as many as 3 connectors. 40 pin point and 80 wire shielded cables. Here's what it looks like. So I told you before, masters in black, slave connectors in gray, and then the motherboard connectors in blue. So you would put this one on the motherboard, you would put the slave in the middle, and the master would be on the end. Any questions about slave and master? Or we got this?
So the master is black.
Yeah, yeah. The master is black in this situation, yes. So if you ever do run into it, um, remember it only moves in megabits per second. You're not getting any type of gigabit transfer rate. That's why they went to SATA. So the old ATA 4 or ATA 5, 6, and 7, the max they did was 133. So that's why they moved to SATA. SCSI, Small Computer Systems Interface. Um, One SCSI HBA can actually control multiple devices. They are older personal computer connection standards that provides high performance data trace between SCSI device and other components of the computer. Typically used to connect storage devices. That's what the SCSI symbol looked like. And The SCSI command language allows HBA to identify which devices are connected and how they'll be accessed. But this is a real old technology. It's not really used that much anymore. So, and you can probably see why. So you have SCSI 1, which moved at 5 megabits per second, a blazing 5 megabits per second. And then fast SCSI moved at 10 megabits per second.
Way back in the 80s.
So that was just blazing right there, buddy. You just couldn't do nothing with that. 10 megs per second. Then you got even closer, and SCSI was still moving faster than SATA hard drives until SATA came out. So you had Ultra 320 SCSI, which moved at 320 megabits per second. But you don't really see that anymore. Actually, it'd be hard to find a SCSI device anywhere. For SCSI, you must have a SCSI host adapter. Must be installed to recognize the devices that are connected. The bus width originally supported 8 devices, meaning daisy chained together. Wide SCSI supported up to 16. Signaling, most buses and devices use the LVD bus. Termination, bus must be terminated at both ends, meaning that you had to have um, it couldn't be open at the end. You had to have something on the end of it. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, SCSI is before my time. And never touched a SCSI device ever. Started building computers in 2003.
Yeah, these were things back in the 90s.
Yeah.
SCSI. 95, 93.
Right. True or false? The read-write heads on a hard drive require regular cleaning to obtain optimum performance on the disk.
True.
Is that your final answer? Because the answer is false.
Thank you.
It does not require to be cleaned. Now, the trick that we used to use when a hard drive didn't read, we would put it in the freezer.
Freezer. I was going to ask about that.
Why would we put it in the freezer?
I don't know. I was gonna say take it out, blow it like a cartridge on Nintendo.
No. We would put it in the freezer because it would shrink the read write heads.
Who?
These read and write heads, it would shrink those.
Shrink them.
Yep, it would shrink them down so that when we plugged it back in, we would get a better connection. Because most of the time, the read write heads would go bad on the hard drive before the disk did. So you would stick it in the freezer to shrink the heads. That most of the time never worked. But every once in a while, you might get lucky. What basic factor might you look at in selecting a high performance drive?
Pin. Pin count.
The RPM. So on the hard disk drive, it's the speed at which it spins. Other factors to include is the access of the seek times, rotation latency, internal and external transfer rates and reliability, but we used to have like the 7500 RPM drives and the 9200 RPM drives. It would just how fast that drive spin, because if it spins faster, you can get the data off of it quicker.
So that's just for hard disk drives, correct?
Yes, because SSDs don't move. What is a smart hard disk? It's a hard disk with self monitoring, analysis, and reporting technology. This means it can provide status reports for diagnostic software, or it can error check itself. True or false, SATA is an interface for hard drives only.
False.
Correct, false. What else can use a SATA interface?
CD.
CD drives, yes. Blu-ray drives, HD disk drives. How many storage devices can be attached to a single SATA port?
6.
A single SATA port. One. Remember, one drive per PATA port. I mean, per SATA port. In what two ways could a PC be configured to use an SSD cache? Using a hybrid drive or using a dual drive configuration, meaning that you have a SSD and a hard disk drive inside of the unit. You are upgrading a drive. You have removed the main panel from the PC, disconnected the power and the power cables, and removed the screws holding the drive to the cage, but it will not slide out. What is your next step? You're going to remove the other panel on the other side to see whether the screws are there. And I'm going to be doing some demonstrations a little bit later on in the class with my GoPro on my head so you can see what I'm doing. So, any questions over that?
No.
Everybody good?
We're good.
All right. Installing and configuring removable storage. We should be able to fly through this a little bit fast. A storage device that can be removed from a computer and or the removable media can be inserted into the drive. So you have a CD, a technology that could hold 700 megabytes, and a DVD, which is digital versatile disc, is an optical storage device that can hold 4.7 gigabits per layer. So remember, dual layer disc held like 9 gigs. So a DVD has about 17 gigs worth of capacity, which means that it was used for software installs, games, and different multimedia. Pits, optical storage media, recessed discs, LANs, the raised areas. So CDR meant that you could record. Burning um, is in optical discs is a process using a special laser used to transform dye to mimic the pits and lands of a pre-mastered CD. CDRW, compact disc containing heat-sensitive compound whose properties can be changed between crystalline and amorphous by a special layer, meaning that it was just rewritable. CDR, recordable, you can only do it once. CDRW, you can do it multiple times. Um, so the main thing about CDs and DVDs is they have the tendency to degrade and become unstable. So DVDs, higher density than CDs, but they were thinner than CDs as well. Can be dual layer or double sided. Double sided discs had to be turned over. Had a faster transfer rate than CDs. Um, the fastest models were 24x read and write speeds. You had DVD-R and DVD-RWs, which is readable and writable. So you had minus R's and plus R's, and then you had plus and minus R's. Most drives either wrote or read in the format of plus or minus. DVD plus or minus R supported dual layer and double sided discs. DVD plus minus RW supports double sided media only. DVD minus RAM was not widely supported, but was optimized for multiple write operations.
What does the plus or minus signify?
It was just the type that the minus R was the type of disk that it could read or it could write. So they were just two different types. So if you had this one, then you could only write to minus. You could only read minus. This one would only read and write with minus. So if you needed to do both, you need to have these two. So I don't know if you ever went to the store and bought the wrong type of DVD-Rs to burn, but that's that happened to me a lot. You get
Yep.
home and figure out that your computer can only read or write to the minus format and not the plus format. So if you bought those plus or minus discs, it didn't matter what format you read at home. But it was just a format problem.
Like it was explained to me, it was like the difference between VHS and Betamax. That companies got together and decided, oh, we're going to do this
Yeah.
method, or other ones said, well, no, we're going to do this method. And then the plus minus came together and brought them all together. So that was my basic understanding of it.
Yeah, that would be it. It's just it was basically everybody was doing their own thing till somebody had to figure out what thing they were doing. We have Blu-ray disc, the latest generation of optical disc drive technology, um, with the disk capacity of 25 gigs per layer. The transfer rate was measured in multiples of 36 megabits per second. Used for HD video recording playback. HD required more bandwidth, more storage space, shorter wavelength, laser than DVD uses, so it had a higher density. Base speed was 4.5 megabits per second with a maximum theoretical rate of 72 megabits per second, 16x. 2x was the minimum required for a movie playback. Um, so the Blu-ray disc capacity standard was 25 gigs, mini disc was 7.8, dual layer was 50. If you had a triple layer, it was 100, and quad layer disc was 128. So DVD fives, 4.7 gigs, single layer, single sided. DVD 9, 8.5. It was dual layer, single sided, meaning that was two layers on top of it. DVD 10s was a single layer, double sided, 9.4 gigs. DVD 18 was dual layer, double sided. DVD video was up to 17, and DVD audio was just 8.5. So the coding regions on DVDs did did have you had to make sure that your DVD player was from that region where it could read it. So if your DVD was coded with region 1, it can only be read in US or Canada's DVD players. Region 2 was Europe, Middle East, Japan, South Africa, and Egypt. Region 3 was Southeast Asia, and so on and so forth. Um, does anybody know why they would do that? A
Copyright protection.
little bit simpler than that.
Where stuff was manufactured.
A little bit simpler than that. It was more about the language.
But wait a minute, Japan and Egypt?
I'm trying to find a common thread between Japan and South Africa.
No, 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 no. When I say about the language, right?
Coding language.
These two are easier to code. So then for all DVDs that needed to read Europe, the Middle East, Japan, South Africa, and Egypt, there's these countries don't have a whole lot of people. So that's why they called it Region 2. Southeast Asia had even more people and more languages. That's why it was by itself. Then South America had a lot of languages to go ahead and code. And then Russia and parts of Africa. And then remember, China had way more people by itself anyway, but it has a lot of different dialects. So it has to be able to read those different regions. So it had nothing to do with the actual, like even with video games. If you buy a video game from Japan, you can only play Japanese games or games with no coding on the playback, but it will come back as Japanese. Kind of get that? So the boards and the decoding that happen inside, it's more expensive if I try to code it for every single language on planet Earth. Get it?
Makes sense.
Yeah. So if I try to do it for every single language on planet Earth, we're going to have a lot more issues. So there's a little bit more reason why they would have coded all these together. I do believe they all don't read, like some of them don't read left to, I mean, they read left to right in places like that. It's those type of things as well. So this is all the properties. And remember too, all this, all the languages are actually going on the disk, not the unit. So the disk has to be able to read this as well. So that's why you would code it here as well when you were burning it. So this is what CD drives look like. They were larger than hard disk drives. They used a 5.25-inch drive bay, um, USB eSATA or Thunderbolt connection, and external power for external installations. Rated by the transfer speed, 50 kilobits per second, originally over 7 megabits per second. Um, Most have read and write capabilities, burn proof technology. So, as we said, those were the three different types of drives: CD drive, DVD drive, and Blu ray drive. So, CD drives can only read CDs, DVD drives can read CDs and DVDs, Blu ray drive can read CDs, DVDs, and Blu rays. Any questions about CDs and DVD drives?
Nope.
All right, flash memory, solid state storage. Um, so you had memory cards and flash memory cards, similar to a ROM chip. Can anybody tell me what ROM stands for?
Read only memory.
Yes. Similar to a ROM chip in that it retains information even when the power is removed, but it adds flexibility that it can be reprogrammed with new contents very quickly. The memory card or flash drives typically used for digital cameras and smartphones, and they are typically small and flat. So they're non-volatile EEPROM and or NAND flash. They're small, light, and compared to other types of storage. Storage capacity uses ranges from 512 megabytes to 256 gigabytes. Larger drives are available, but they are very expensive. So yes, you can buy a terabyte thumb drive. Packaging of flash memory varies. You have a USB thumb or pen drive and different types of memory cards. SD is secure digital, maximum capacity. The original SD cards were 2 gigs. SD high capacity 32 gigs, and the SD XC is up to 2 terabytes. Um, so the original specification was 25 megs. UHS allowed up to 108, and UHS2 rated it up to 312. Then you have mini SD, which were smaller SD cards with the same capacity and speed destination as these up here. Then micro SD, the smallest, with the same up here. Then you had compact flash cards, um, compact flash, which were used in digital cameras, and I used them in my beat machines. We use compact flash cards, and then you had XD, format for Olympus cameras only, and they have since been discontinued. Memory card readers connects to a USB hub. They're also available as an external device that connects to an external USB port. This is what they look like, meaning that, hey, I can read smart media or the XD card or the compact flash or micro SD MMC SD cards, or USB 2.0. External drive closures. Um, so you can actually, instead of buying an external drive, it's actually a little bit cheaper for you to buy an internal drive and just put it in an external case. And that's all that really is. Sometimes you can get it to where it reads with Thunderbolt ports or USB 3.0 so that you get faster read and write speeds, but it's just easier to create your own sometimes. Any questions about that?
The SDXC cards are discontinued.
Yeah, yeah. They were only for Olympus cameras.
Okay.
What is the primary benefit of using removable solid state storage? Answer will vary, but should include the portability of thumb drives and flash memory cards, plus easier and faster writing compared to to optical media. Meaning that you could just drag and drop something really quickly onto a SD card and run off, or a thumb drive and run off. If you had to put it on a CD, then you would have to wait for that CD to be written first. Which type of which of the following media types allow you to write to an optical disc only once?
Um, CDR.
Mm-hmm.
ROM.
No, CD what?
CDR, CDR,
CDR. And
W,
what's
Or
the other one?
CDRW. Oh,
DVD.
DVD-R.
DVD-R.
Uh,
CDR and DVD-R. Those are the two.
So that would be plus or minus R.
No, well, they just listed them there. But yes, if it was a minus R, you could still only write to it once.
Shout out to all my bootleg movie guys. They know the answer to that.
If a CD writer is 128x, 8x, and 32x, what is the maximum transfer rate when creating a CDR? Now, the speed chart is actually in the book if you looked at it, okay? So that will be 1.8 megabits or 1800 kilobits per second. But that speed chart is actually in your book. Chapter 3,
yeah.
Activity 3.5. True or false? DVD minus RW media allows double layer recording. False. Only DVD, DVD minus R, or DVD plus R media can be double layer. So why would DVD RW only be single layer?
Because of the writing component.
Yes, it has to rewrite. So if you only had to write to it once, getting to that second layer is a lot harder to keep doing over and over again. What is the transfer rate of a 10x DVD drive? 13.21 megabits per second. What is the capacity of a single Blu-ray dual layer recordable disc?
50 gigs.
Correctamundo, 25 gigs per layer. True or false? A memory card reader is needed to attach a USB flash. A memory card reader is needed to attach a USB flash memory drive to a PC. Say that again.
True.
False.
It uses USB.
Yeah, it's a USB flash drive, so it'll plug into any USB.
Gotcha.
Name the two main specifications for currently available memory card formats. They are SD and compact flash. Them the only two that are available now. And people, we are going to stop there because Raid is where we're going to start off on Thursday.
Okay.
Raid is going to go